But few people know that this crash began with the decision of just one man. A man whom newspapers call Sunshine Charlie. America's most popular banker. This was Charles Mitchell. He was the one who triggered what we now call the Great Depression. 7 months earlier, Charles Mitchell uttered a phrase that was supposed to save the American economy. Instead, it set in motion the mechanism of the most terrible crash in human history. The Great Depression lasted 10 years and changed the lives of an entire generation of Americans. 25 million people lost their jobs, every fourth person. 5,000 banks closed forever, taking with them the savings of millions of families. 2 million Americans were homeless. Families lived in cardboard boxes in tent cities that were bitterly called Hoovervilles. Suicides increased by 30%. In a country that just yesterday considered itself the richest in the world, people stood in lines for free bread. But how did it all begin? In the 1920s, America was experiencing an unprecedented boom. The Roaring Twenties, Ford cars, radios in every home, jazz clubs, rising skyscrapers. It seemed that prosperity would last forever. And it was then that a man stepped onto the scene who would turn the dream of wealth into a nightmare for millions. Charles Edwin Mitchell was born in 1877 to a farmer's family in Massachusetts. Nothing predicted that this simple man's son would become America's most influential banker and change the fate of an entire nation. In 1919, Mitchell headed National City Bank, the country's largest bank with assets of $2.7 billion. This was more than the budget of most countries in the world at that time. But the ambitious banker had a revolutionary idea that would change everything. Before Mitchell, stocks were rich men's toys. Only 500,000 Americans, less than 1% of the population, owned stocks. Ordinary people kept money in banks or bought bonds. The stock market was a closed club for the elite. But Mitchell saw a huge opportunity in this. Every American should be a capitalist, he said. Why should wealth belong only to the wealthy? In 1920, Mitchell created a subsidiary company, National City Company. Its task was simple: sell stocks to ordinary Americans right in bank branches. When a person came to open a savings account, they were offered to invest in the American dream. Mitchell turned stock selling into an art. He studied every detail: sales psychology, human greed, the dreams of ordinary Americans. His salespeople were placed in 69 bank branches across the country. They weren't boring bankers. These were real dream merchants, trained according to Mitchell's special program. The advertising was revolutionary for its time. Ads appeared in newspapers. Get rich by investing just $15 a month. Become a partner of American Telephone and Telegraph. Your children will be proud of you. You're an investor. Magazines published success stories. How a secretary from Ohio became rich in 2 years. Streetcar driver bought his own house with dividends. Salespeople used clever tricks. They told clients, "Mr. Johnson, you don't want to work for someone else your whole life, do you? General Electric stocks. This is your chance to become master of your own destiny." Or, "Mrs. Smith, your husband works for Ford. Why don't you become a co-owner of the company?" National City Company offices were decorated with posters showing happy families against the backdrop of big houses. Thanks to stocks, we bought our dream home. Happy faces, expensive cars, smiling children, everything screamed, this could be your life. But the real genius was in the credit scheme. Stocks could be bought on margin. Put down only 10% of your own money, borrow the rest from the bank. Imagine, you have $100, you buy $1,000 worth of stocks. If they grow by 20%, you earn $200. Double your money. Salespeople demonstrated this with simple examples. Look, Mr. Brown bought Radio Corporation stocks for $500, investing only $50. In 6 months, they grew by $150. His profit? 300%. And your money in the bank would have brought only $15. The result exceeded all expectations. From 1925 to 1929, the volume of loans for stock purchases grew from $2 to $8.5 billion, a 425% increase in 4 years. the number of Americans owning stocks grew from 500,000 to 10 million people. A teacher from Ohio mortgaged her house for Radio Corporation stocks. A farmer from Kansas sold his cattle to buy General Motors papers. A mechanic from Detroit invested 6 months' salary in Ford stocks. Everyone believed this was their chance to get rich, and Mitchell basked in the glory. He was called a financial genius and a democratizer of Wall Street. In 1928, he earned $1.2 million. In today's money, that's $20 million. Magazines wrote about him as the man who made every American a potential millionaire. But Mitchell went further. He created investment trusts, funds that bought stocks with borrowed money. These trusts themselves became joint stock companies whose stocks were again bought on credit. The result was a pyramid of debts built on the hope that prices would rise forever. By spring 1929, even the most optimistic economists began to worry. Stock prices were rising faster than the economy. The Federal Reserve System sounded the alarm. The market was overheated. The numbers were frightening. Major company stocks were trading at prices 15 times their annual profit. For comparison, today such a ratio is considered a sign of a speculative bubble. On February 6, 1929, the Federal Reserve System issued a warning to banks. Stop issuing loans for speculation in the stock market. The central bank demanded limiting margin lending. The market's reaction was immediate. In March, stocks began to fall. In a few days, Americans lost billions. Panic was growing. It seemed the bubble had burst. And then on March 12, 1929, Charles Mitchell made a decision that changed the course of history. He called a press conference and spoke words that will go down in history. National City Bank will provide the market with all the liquidity it needs. We will not allow an unnecessary crisis to occur. The effect was immediate. Newspapers came out with headlines. Sunshine Charlie saves the market. Stocks bounced back. In 1 week, the market recovered all losses and went to new records.
Applegate bacon. Our meats are Applegate humanely raised, with no antibiotics, ever.
This is Alex. Alex needed help investing his savings. With his advisor Dennis, he opened 3 accounts.
One for now, one for later, and of course, his retirement.
More than big goals for his future, Alex has got a plan to get there.
Your video is crushing it in one country, but the world is waiting. Dubbing and subtitles are a headache. Not anymore. Upload your video to Keyvex. Pick a new language. We support over 70. Here's a game.
Opioid addiction gets between you and what you love. Once monthly
After Mitchell's statement, the market entered the final phase of madness. In the summer of 1929, stocks reached historic highs. The Dow Jones Index rose to 381 points, a record that wouldn't be beaten for the next 25 years. 3 million new Americans entered the market in the last months before the crash. Wives secretly pawned jewelry to buy stocks. Shoe shiners gave investment advice. Even children spent pocket money on papers. Those who entered the market earlier felt like geniuses. Simple clerks became millionaires on paper. Chauffeurs bought mansions, secretaries, fur coats. America was intoxicated with the illusion of endless wealth. But behind the facade of prosperity lurked the mathematics of catastrophe. Every dollar invested in stocks was backed by only 10 cents of real money. With a 10% price drop, the margin investor lost everything. With a 50% drop, they owed the bank more than they earned in a year. By the fall of 1929, smart money began to get nervous. Large institutional investors, pension funds, insurance companies, banks saw warning signs that escaped the attention of ordinary people. First, economic indicators were deteriorating. Industrial production slowed, car sales fell, new home construction decreased, but stocks continued to rise, ignoring reality. The gap between the stock market and the economy became critical. Second, smart investors understood the mathematics of margin trading better than others. They saw when 90% of money in the market was borrowed funds, any decline would turn into catastrophe. Joseph Kennedy, father of the future president, later recounted, "When the shoe shiner started giving me stock advice, I knew it was time to sell." Third, Insiders knew about Federal Reserve System plans. The central bank was preparing to raise interest rates, which would make margin loans more expensive and could trigger mass selling. Large players began quietly taking profits. They sold in small portions so as not to crash the market prematurely. But by October, patience ran out. Some banks received insider information that the Bank of England planned to raise rates, which would automatically force the Fed to follow suit. On the morning of October 24th, 1929, New York's largest investment funds made a coordinated decision. Time to exit. They began selling in large blocks, hundreds of thousands of shares simultaneously. Prices crawled down, first slowly, then in an avalanche. By noon, panic began. In one day, they sold a record 13 million shares, 5 times more than usual. Brokers couldn't process orders. The telephone system couldn't handle the load. The domino effect that Mitchell had unwittingly created with his system was launched. First domino, falling prices forced banks to demand additional contributions from margin investors. Second domino, people had no money for additional payments. They were forced to sell stocks, which further crashed prices. Third domino, falling prices made stocks unsuitable as collateral for new loans. Banks stopped lending, which deprived the market of liquidity. Fourth domino, banks that had issued too many margin loans began to go bankrupt. The first to fall were those who followed Mitchell's example. October 29th, Black Tuesday, the final crash. In one day, Americans lost $14 billion, more than the U.S. spent on the entire World War I. Behind the dry numbers hid human tragedies. Edward Hopkins, a mechanic from Detroit, bought Ford stocks for $5,000. His life savings. By November, they were worth $200, and the bank demanded an additional $3,000. Hopkins hanged himself in his garage. Mary Coalfield, a teacher from Ohio, mortgaged her parents' house to buy Radio Corporation stocks. After the crash, the bank repossessed the house. A family of 3 generations found themselves on the street. In New York, lines formed not only at banks but also on bridges. Suicides reached record levels. The Brooklyn Bridge became a symbol of despair. Those who just yesterday considered themselves millionaires ended their lives there. What about Mitchell? In 1933, he was called before Congress. Senator Carter Glass asked, "Do you consider yourself responsible for the ruin of millions of American families?" Mitchell replied, "I wanted to give people the opportunity to get rich. No one forced them to buy stocks." But justice caught up with Sunshine Charlie. In 1933, he was tried for tax evasion of $850,000. He was forced to resign in complete disgrace. The man who was called the market's savior became a symbol of greed and irresponsibility. American society was divided in its attitude towards Mitchell.
This is Elder G again. You can see that's the exact same thing that President Trump is doing. President Trump, he know that the deficit, our debt is coming up to $40 trillion. That there's no way to pay. So what he's doing is he's trying to build his own military with ICE and with the border security. And he just making him and his friends and his billionaire friend multi-billionaire, multi-millionaire. And when it crashed, the AI gonna be them took all the jobs. The robots is going to be doing all the physical jobs. And the people is just going to come into slavery again. I'm not talking about race now. I'm talking about that there ain't going to be no jobs. Because AI is going to be took all the executive jobs. And the robots is going to take all the labor jobs. And you're going to have hundreds of millions of people that can't pay their mortgage. They're going to lose everything just to run behind the devil. That's why it's so important now to come to Jesus. So we can come together as a team. So we can build our own bomb shelters for the black and brown people and the white people that support us. That we can own our own land so we can grow our own vegetable, grow our own fruit, raise our own pork and beef and poultry, make our own clothes, make our own weapons. Because that's where we're going. Donald Trump, they're going to suck up. They ain't giving no accountability for our tax dollars. They're out buying new jet planes. They flying around the world on our dollar with no accountability. And they're taking the money from our kids' free lunch program that can't afford it. It's taking away from grants that help minorities go to good school so they can get a better education. They're taking it away from Medicaid so the people that can work 40 or 50 years that can't take care of themselves and their family, they taking all that away. But they're giving the multimillionaire and the multi-billionaires tax breaks. Can't you see where you're going? Don't wait till it's too late. We got a chance right now. We got a chance to come together and to save ourselves and stop looking for other people to save us. We are the majority of the population in America. The people that making $50,000 or less. We can turn this thing around. We don't need the multimillionaire and the multi-billionaire. They need us. We need to set the record right before AI come into full effect and before the robots take all the physical work job. We need to move now and we need to move fast. Thank you.